Happy memories of these cruise, and that we will see you all again soon. Good night, everyone, and God bless. And I know that it is love in this place is much brighter than tomorrow. The world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race.
So it slightly overlaps.
The whole enterprise is crazy, and it's an absolute scam which is going to cost you a great deal.
It's rather like paying monkeys, because what happens is the civil servants draw up the list, and if it's vote number 58 and the piece of paper says vote yes, you vote yes, and if it's number 59 and it says vote no, you vote no. It is an absolute farce. It is a complete sham masquerading as democracy.
You should not be mistaken. It's very, very strong forces are working towards this federal state.
This is the village of Goudhurst. It's been said that if Kent is the Garden of England, then Goudhurst is the Garden of Kent. The English way of life has gone on here for centuries. But is all that about to become a thing of the past? In 1996, chairman of the British Referendum Party, Sir James Goldsmith, circulated copies of a short film documentary to millions of households across the country. Frustrated by the lack of mainstream press coverage over what he saw as the dismantling of British sovereignty and independence by colluding politicians, Sir James's wake-up call to the people of Great Britain was stark and shocked many.
What you're about to hear will both surprise and outrage you. It's the true story of Europe. It's the story the politicians don't want you to hear, because it shows how they've deceived us and betrayed our nation. Only in 1994 did Chancellor Kohl's foreign policy spokesman, speaking on behalf of the ruling party of Europe's dominant nation, Germany, clearly reveal the true plan. The plan is to create a federal European superstate. Into it will be merged up to 25 ancient European nations, including our own. This new country, called Europe, will have one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag, and one anthem. That has been the plan all along. But those who favoured it knew the people of Europe would never accept it. They would never willingly surrender their freedoms to become just a province in a vast European superstate. So what did the politicians do? They conspired to keep the truth from the people.
So what is the truth behind the European Union? Is it, as our politicians keep telling us, Britain's best hope for the future? A chance to regain some of that lost prestige on the world stage by being at the centre of Europe? Today in Britain, all three major political parties miraculously appear to agree at least on one thing. They believe in the destruction of Great Britain as an independent nation. They believe an integrated Europe makes sense, that it is the modern, forward-thinking way to go, that it would prevent any chance of a third European war. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. The need to unite Europe grew understandably out of the devastation left behind after two catastrophic world wars. Of all the empires, it was perhaps the Nazis who came closest to pulling off the military conquest and occupation of Europe in recent times. In June 1940, Hermann Göring, Reich Marshal of the German Luftwaffe, reviews final plans for Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion of Great Britain. He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community. In 1942, a conference is held in Berlin to discuss this political and economic integration of Europe. Of all the nations targeted, Britain has proved the wild card because she alone has successfully resisted invasion. Rising to his feet at the conference, Nazi economist Professor Horst Jecht of Berlin University firmly declares that Britain is the greatest obstacle to Germany fulfilling her historic aim of dominating Europe. Winston Churchill also believed Britain had an incompatible destiny with that of the continent. Referring to the United Kingdom's reliance on her overseas trade, Churchill stated, "If Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, we will choose the sea." Both Churchill and Jecht were independently remarking on the same phenomenon Napoleon had noticed 150 years before, that Great Britain was a global trading power, and the nations of Europe weren't. According to the Nazis, Great Britain's awesome maritime capability was beggaring Europe because it was drawing trade away from the continent. If Britain could be conquered militarily or economically, broken up once and for all as a significant economic and political entity, the spoils of all her trade and wealth would go to whoever ran the new European empire. Few in Berlin were in any doubt about who would do the running. But the tide of war turned against Germany. In 1944, a meeting was held at the Hotel Rotas House in Strasbourg between officials of the Nazi government and German industrialists. The theme of the meeting was, how will Germany dominate the peace when she loses the war? Following the end of World War II, the rebuilding of Europe, and Germany in particular, became a pressing necessity and was largely funded under the Marshall Plan by the United States. Both Washington and London saw the rapid stabilization of the continent after the war as essential in order to prevent any incursion into Western Europe by the new enemy to be feared, the Soviet Union. Winston Churchill agreed that some form of Commonwealth of Nations in Europe was desirable for establishing stability and a lasting peace. But he never envisioned Britain as being part of any future United States of Europe.
Winston Churchill's view of Great Britain's relationship with Europe after the Second World War is summarized with these words of his. But we have our own dream and our own task. We are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not comprised. We are interested and associated, but not absorbed.
The Allied answer to military stability in Europe was to be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which came into existence in 1949 as a permanent defense alliance for Europe. The European Union officially began life as the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, a modest industrial cooperation between France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg and Holland. 6 years later, in 1957, the Treaty of Rome was signed by the 6 participating coal and steel community nations. Declaring its goal as the ever closer union of the peoples of Europe, the Treaty of Rome went far beyond launching just a common market. It established the fledgling apparatus for an idealistic new superpower. This new entity was given an existing and unsettlingly familiar name: the European Economic Community. In 1963, Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer signed the Treaty of Élysée, signifying the symbolic burying of the hatchet between France and Germany. This was the start of a dynamic new dual leadership role in Europe for the two countries. De Gaulle later resigned, and within a year was dead. Britain was invited to submit yet another application to join the EEC. This time, Edward Heath, now as Britain's Conservative Prime Minister, signed the Treaty of Rome and took Britain into the common market on New Year's Day, 1973. Responding to deep concerns within his own country that joining the EEC would compromise Britain's national sovereignty and independence, Heath sought to reassure the British people in a government white paper. He wrote, "There is no question of Britain losing essential national sovereignty." The master plan, of course, was well known to Edward Heath, Lord Hailsham and their colleagues in Brussels. It was the eventual creation of a new European superstate out of 25 existing nations in Europe and Scandinavia, and Britain was going to be part of it. From 1973 onwards, the slow but consistent transfer of power from Westminster to Brussels through successive treaties our own politicians signed became known as the acquis communautaire. It was nicknamed the Ratchet, for once powers had been given to Brussels by the member state, they could never be returned.
Initially I thought, like everybody else, that we had joined a common market, and what could be nicer and more friendly and sensible and economically wise to do. But since then, in 1975, when we had the vote to remain in that, so we were told, it's become one or two things further than just a common market. It then became, a few years later, a European Economic Community, then a European Community. It's now the European Union with all sorts of controls and restrictions, regulations, and we're fast approaching via this new constitution something that the French have already named potentially a United States of Europe. And I'm not at all sure that that's what I and many others voted to join back in 1975.
Say in 75 we signed up for a social trade agreement, and it's the people who've let the governments, successive governments, gradually vote away our democratic rights. This government has no right to sign us up to the Constitution without the will of the people. But we need the will of the people to stop it. It's no use coming down in 5 years' time, we've signed up to it, we can't get out of it, and the people say, well, we don't want it. It's up to the people of the day to say no.
This is the Strasbourg Parliament. It was built in 1999 at a cost of £300 million. It is open for only 4 days every month. What happens at the end of that 4 days is we load our offices into tin boxes, and then lorries arrive downstairs and drive the whole lot nearly 300 miles up to Brussels, where the boxes are unpacked for the next 3 weeks when we're supposed to be there, and then it's all brought back again. This whole process of shifting the administration and the staff from one home to another is costing the European taxpayer over €100 million a year.
It is the biggest scam in human history. We're not talking about billions of pounds, we're talking about trillions of pounds. Why a country which has been independent for 900 or more years would ever wish to involve itself in such political chicanery and nonsense as something which defies anyone who is sane. And only now have we got just about 14 or 15 months before they rivet on us a pan-European constitution which would be superior to our own splendid constitution, one which is the pride of the world and pioneered the way for sensible living. And here we are giving it all away.
The political aim is to develop the framework for a real European Union constitution, and in my opinion this means building up a European federal state.
In black and white, the draft constitution wording confirms Brussels will exercise competence and primacy over member states' own laws. For the British, this will mean being stripped of any remaining independence, losing control over our foreign policy and armed forces, the handing over of our legal system and law enforcement to the European Union, the scrapping of the pound sterling to be replaced by the euro, the handing over of our remaining currency and gold reserves to the European Central Bank, and the total regulation of British domestic and international trade by the European Union. Coincidentally or otherwise, the European goal of dominating Britain, unfinished business going back centuries, will have been accomplished. Most have already noticed that the job of running Britain is increasingly being carried out in Brussels not by British politicians, but by unaccountable foreign committees most in this country have never even heard of, let alone voted into power. These unelected, inscrutable forums dictate what citizens across the Eurozone can and can't do, down to the last detail. Henceforth, Britain is to be ruled from the new Europe, by the new Europe, and for the benefit of the new Europe. The powers driving this new superstate have always been, indeed as they are today, France and Germany. Lindsay Jenkins worked as a senior civil servant in the British Ministry of Defence for almost 10 years and spent a further 10 working for British and American investment banks in the City of London. She is the author of 2 books exposing the origins of European federalism and the emergence of the European Union.
Today, over 80%, that is 80%, of everything that goes through the House of Commons and the House of Lords merely rubber stamps Brussels. And there is an awful lot of it. We have recently celebrated, if that is the right word, our 40,000th directive from Brussels. And having attacked central government, now Brussels is attacking our local government structure. So we have lost, just to recap, in the following areas. We have lost 100% of our control, or near enough, over the environment. The British scenery, countryside, everything that comprises environment, including health and safety regulations, absolutely everything. We have lost near enough 100% control over our fishing. We have lost 100% control over our farming. And we have lost 100% control over our trade policy. And that last is of particular significance when you consider that Britain is the 4th largest economy in the world, and we do more trade per head of population than any other country in the world by far.